Welcome back to the Expressions of Destiny podcast, where faith, leadership, and purpose align. I'm Jen, and I'm really glad that you're here today. So whether this is your first time listening, or you've been walking with us through this series, I want you to know you're joining a conversation that matters. Over the past several weeks, we've been moving through a leadership journey together. And so let me just go ahead and share a little of what we've been talking about. We talked about what happens when truth enters the room. We've explored the difference between feedback and fragility. We've clarified why resonance is not the same as agreement. And then we reflected on how integrity is revealed in our response. And so today we're going to kind of tackle this topic of building cultures that can handle truth. Again, it's all in that truth. It's having this understanding that we should not be afraid to hear the truth. Now, as you listen to these different episodes, you're going to realize we do a lot of repetition. We repeat a lot of things. Why? Because repetition is learning. And so I love that, when our daughters were younger, my husband always taught them this one phrase, especially when they were struggling with something. And he would ask them, what is repetition? And he taught them to always say, repetition is learning. If you repeat it, you learn it. Just a little side note here that I'm throwing in there because it's so important. We have to hear these things over and over and over so that we can receive it and then we can respond with it. It's a lot easier to know exactly how to respond to situations when we practice it, when we are actually living it, when we're talking about it, when we understand it. And so again, what is repetition? Repetition is learning. If you repeat it, you will learn it. And so as we go through these different topics week after week, you're going to hear a lot of things that are repeated, and that's on purpose. My heart is that you're able to receive it and understand and be able to apply it in the current situations that you're in, or maybe even think back to a time that you did experience some of these things, how you reacted then, or maybe you responded in the right way, but to know that there is always a testimony and a story in the things that we share. There's always a testimony and a story that is going to help someone else along in their journey. And so, all right, with that, let's go ahead and jump in here. Today we're going to take the next step, okay? We're kind of tackling these in layers. And so, because leadership doesn't just shape individuals, we understand leadership shapes culture, okay? What kind of culture are we actually building? This is the question that's before us right now. What kind of culture are we actually building? And even if you are not the leader, if you're not the CEO or the president of a company, if you are not in that higher rank position, you are still helping to shape that culture. And sometimes it's the teams and the employees that are able to somehow shift a culture when they're brave and bold enough to just speak up and speak the truth and not be afraid of what someone else may say. So let's jump in here. Truth thrives in culture before it thrives in conversation. I want you to hear that. Truth will thrive in culture before it thrives in the conversation. And here's something that we don't talk about enough. Truth is not sustained by a single courageous voice, okay? It's not just that one person that stood up and shouted what everybody else was wanting to say. It's not just that one voice. Truth is sustained by the environment that receives it. So I have been in this situation many times because, quite frankly, we're going to experience this probably in every job position that we take. Every model that we're a part of, no matter where we're at. And so I realized a lot of times that when people would share things with me about how they felt about the culture, not so much the organization. It's sad that it usually comes down to this. The organization may have such a beautiful purpose and mission, but the culture that the people work in, the environment, can be strained for, trying to keep a softer word there. It can be quite strained or straining. And so when you encounter other people that are just expressing their heart to you on just things that are valid, the ways that they feel, the ways that they feel like they're being overworked. They're not being appreciated. They're underpaid. They're stressed with things that are happening outside of the job. Yes, those things matter too. We can't ignore what individuals are going through. They are a part of this organization. They're a part of this company. Their outside life, as much as we want them focused on what it is that they have come to do in their position, what they have been hired for, what they're getting paid for, we still have to have that part of us in our heart that cares about what they may be experiencing in their personal life. We don't have to dive deep into, the circumstances or the issues or situations that they're in, but we can show some care and concern. We can try to be understanding. We can try to shift that environment, that atmosphere, to a loving and caring community to help them walk through it. Okay. And so I'm just going to stop right there with that. That is very important to me. You'll hear me talk about that a lot, because they're not just our servants. Employees are not just our servants. They're not just that, a individual, that has a name, that is going through life, but hey, you're here to do a job. That no, there needs to be a little more care and concern in those situations. And so let's just keep moving on. I'm sure we'll come back to that point. All right. So when we talk about, truth not being sustained by a single courageous voice, when we talk about it being sustained by the environment that receives it, you can have honest people working inside unhealthy cultures, and truth will still be silenced. Been there. I have been there so many times. Let me kind of sidetrack here. There is an example that I can share. So honest people in unhealthy cultures, and the truth will still be silenced. All right. I'm kind of jumping out here on a limb with this one. One of the most recent organizations that I worked for, and you guys know I never name names and never leave a trail of who I work for, where I worked, because that is all part of my ministry, my mission. When I enter these different jobs that I've had over the course of, 2 decades, they have always been an assignment, and that assignment leads to everything that I have done in the past years. Everywhere that I've been, the things that I experience, I document not for the purpose of blasting that organization or those individuals by name. I document them as an example that I can share. It's my testimony, right? I can share what I feel I need to help other people. And we all do that. We do that in our daily conversations with friends and family. But this is on a larger scale, because this is my purpose. This is my job. This is what I do, is I help cultures heal. And so, in this one particular instance, I remember a phrase that was always said whenever there was an issue, whenever there was a problem. The organization was wonderful. The mission, what we did on a daily basis for people, for the community, it was probably one of the most rewarding things that anybody who worked in that organization could ever experience. It was very rewarding to see the help that we were providing for the community. But that being said, anytime there was an interior issue, something within the staff, something within the teams, the people, where if they tried to express, their concern, or their upset, their frustration about the way something had happened, the way that maybe things were not organized, there was underlying problems, with the system and how it worked or did not work most times. And so the one phrase that was always given was, well, at the end of the day, were things accomplished? At the end of the day, did such and such get done? Well, think about this. At the end of the day, was the community helped? And so that phrase, yes, I understand the point in it. Were the people helped? Yes, that was the most important part of the mission, to serve our community. But the statement was very dismissive of everything else that had happened. And so you can imagine employees and team members being very frustrated and stressed out because whatever it was that maybe they felt could have been done better, or could have even been a slight change, to the way that we did things, it was dismissed. Everything that they were feeling, everything that they were expressing was immediately dismissed by that one statement. Well, at the end of the day, was such and such accomplished? And so they were left sitting there thinking, well, yes, it was. The people were served. The community was taken care of. And they still had to walk away with that heaviness of, but this still did not get resolved. And so I want to share that so that you can understand this statement. You can have honest people working inside unhealthy cultures, and truth will still be silenced. It is dismissed. The truth that is trying to be spoken is dismissed as unimportant. It's not anything that is relative, it's just not important. Let's just say it that way. It is the easiest way to say it. In their mind and their thought, what you had to say was not important. And so they dismiss it because they don't want to have to deal with it. They don't want to have to listen to it, and that's the truth. All right, let's go ahead and move on here so we don't get stuck on one point. But the stories and the examples are so important. All right, and so the truth will still be silenced, not because people lack courage, right? I want you to understand that. But it's because culture sends these constant signals, and I'm going to share some of those signals with you right now. The signals are, where culture might determine, let's see here, what gets rewarded. Culture sometimes will determine what gets punished. It may determine what gets protected, even ignored, what gets ignored in the situation, which is what we just talked about. And it gets labeled as too much. Okay? So just kind of hold on to those as we continue this conversation. Culture answers the unspoken question every person is asking, whether they say it out loud or not. And here's the question. Is it actually safe to tell the truth here? That question is so deep, and it runs so deep in so many different places of employment. And it should not be a question. Is it actually safe to tell the truth here? You should never have to be concerned with that as an employee or even as management. I mean, I'm totally never dismissing management or supervisors in these, these moments that we talk about, because they still have another leader that they have to report to. And so sometimes the leaders that are under the head leader are experiencing a lot of this, and that's where the stress comes, and that's why they react the way that they do with those that they have been placed over to lead. So you can see they're kind of stuck in the middle here. And so I want you to remember that. Is it actually safe to tell the truth here? You should always feel safe to tell the truth without feeling like something is going to happen in your position or your relationship within that business or that organization. And here's the thing, is because people don't decide whether to be honest based on policy. They decide based on experience. And so let's talk about why some cultures reject the truth. A lot of rejection going on here. Most unhealthy cultures don't reject truth because it's wrong. They reject it because it's disruptive. It's going to disrupt what's going on in their everyday. It's going to disrupt, what they do in their position. It is going to be seen as a problem. So truth disrupts comfort, control, a power imbalance. Think about that one. Unspoken agreements, in patterns that have been normalized for years. They get so used to doing things a certain way, even when it's wrong. There is this individual that I have studied under for several years now. And one of the things that he says that I love is practice does not make perfect. Practice makes habit. And so it's basically saying that the more you practice something, it's going to become a habit. So here's the whole idea behind that is if you've been practicing something for a while or a very long time and you've been doing it wrong the entire time, you have basically just established a habit of doing that thing wrong. If you've been doing it right, then you've been doing it right. You've established that habit of doing it right. And so we never reach that level of perfection. We're just always getting better. But are we getting better at doing it the wrong way? Or are we getting better at doing it the right way? And so I love that he teaches that. I love that there's truth to that and understanding that practice is not going to make perfect. And so again, we go back to that point, patterns that have been normalized for years, patterns that they have just been so used to doing. They're not going to change it. They are set in their ways. Truth has a way of turning the lights on. That can become very, very dangerous, very shocking. I have seen companies and organizations begin to decline and fail because something was brought to the light. I'm actually following something right now and researching and learning a little more about it. And, you know, in my heart, I always believe that we show grace. We always remember that there is a way where people can return back to the right way of doing things. But the lights do have to be turned on a lot of times. The truth has to be made known in the way that individuals may have been treated, the way that maybe a company or an organization was run, maybe there was some fraudulent activity. It could be anything that is going on, but the lights will eventually be turned on at some point. Months later, years later, decades later, it does not matter. The lights will eventually come on. And so we think about it. When the culture has learned to function in the dark, these lights feel threatening. So anytime that something is brought up, anytime something is mentioned, anytime there's a moment where it can feel a little testy, you know, it's going to get shut down immediately because those lights feel threatening, or even the thought of the lights coming on is threatening. So instead of curiosity, cultures will respond with silence, avoidance. They'll try to avoid the whole situation, deflection. They'll start to place blame. They'll try to minimize everything. And they will certainly try to take control the whole situation so that nothing gets out of hand, gets out of their hands, okay? Not always because leaders are malicious, and I want you to understand that. It's just what they've known. But it's because the culture has never really designed it. How can I say this? It just wasn't designed to hold truth. It wasn't anything that was practiced, anything that was important to them. Or maybe it just got away from them. And so once you get stuck in a pattern, or you get stuck, you know, circling the same thing over and over, it's very hard to break free. It's very hard to remove yourself from that. And so it could take time. It could take patience. It could take a little bit of help. And it can certainly take grace. But we have to do everything that we can to shift that culture, to change the environment, and to make it more positive, just really by sharing the truth, by speaking the truth in these situations. But I also want to remind you that in these environments, in these cultures that refuse to change, over time, the people will learn, you know, to just don't say that. Don't say those certain things that don't want to be heard. Don't bring that particular thing up. Have you ever been talking to somebody at work or in an office and you're like, well, let's not talk about that. Let's not bring it up. It's just going to stir up more issues. It's going to cause more problems. Let's just keep it quiet. And that is certainly my next point, is it's easier just to stay quiet because nobody wants to be involved in any type of issue, those that are non-confrontational. So eventually truth will leave the room. We need to keep truth in the room. We need to do everything we can to keep truth a part of everything. So now I want to jump to talking about the cost of cultures that can't handle the truth. So when truth isn't welcome, there's something else that fills that gap. A couple of things to look out for. Assumptions will begin to grow, okay? Resentment will build up between people, within people. Supervisor versus an employee. Manager versus a supervisor over them. The employees versus the CEO or the president or the store manager, whatever it is. This resentment will begin to grow and build up. Trust will just be all of a sudden erode very, very quietly. And then performance may continue, but the health of that organization does not. And you can hit goals, but you can still lose people. You can maintain image and still damage integrity. Very easy to do. What is our easiest example? Social media. People can appear to be in these great places, a great place in their life, financially stable, they look good, they look healthy, and then you find out later that they are going through the hardest time in their life. They actually don't own any of the stuff that they're portraying on social media, in their videos and their pictures. They are the complete opposite of how they are displaying themselves before the camera. Same thing with businesses, you guys. Same thing. They can appear to be healthy. They can look like, there's nothing. They maintain that image. Okay. They're still hitting the goals. They're still doing the mission. They're still helping the people. The people on the outside, this is real. The people on the outside that are being served, the clients, the customers, the neighbors, the community, the other businesses, those that are being served are really, they're in a place where they're looking at their hero. The image is there. They are looking at their hero because someone is helping them, but they have no idea what is going on the inside. And that is what is kept secret, that is kept behind that wall so that others cannot see. And there is literally a wall built up so that people cannot see. And then you have those that are helping to serve the community on the inside, that are struggling, that are hurting, that are frustrated, that are concerned, they're confused. It's like, what happened? The first moments of my time here, the first weeks, the first months was like, I couldn't have found a better place to be. And then it slowly just starts to deteriorate. And the truth comes out of what it's really like. But they're made to feel like they have to keep it silent. So I know I'm speaking to a lot of people here, but I want you to know you're not the only one who has had to go through it. My experiences right now speak. My experiences over the years, the decades. It's not in the last couple of years. It's not just in the last 5 years. It's not 10 years. It is all of the years. There is always going to be a place where you will experience this. But are you going to be the person, the individual, the employee, the manager or supervisor to help change that culture, to help bring to light what needs to be brought out. So cultures that can't handle truth, they'll eventually struggle with these things. Burnout. Okay, burnout in the employees, number one. First and foremost, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know I've done a whole series on burnout culture. Go back and listen to it. But burnout is definitely number one. Burnout with the employees. As the employees begin to burn out, the management begins to burn out. The organization hopefully does not start to burn out because they still have a mission to complete. They still have something that they have to go out there and do every day. Their purpose, right? Living their purpose. But the burnout will begin to drag people down. Disengagement. People that don't even want to be a part. Oh my goodness, I have been in organizations where, and businesses where people would come together and eat lunch all the time, and they would want to meet up on the outside and do things, and then all of a sudden, they're not wanting to come into the break room. They're not wanting to sit amongst certain individuals. They're not wanting to be around those people. They are completely removing themselves during that lunch break. Now, granted, that is fine. Sometimes we just want to step away from the work and we want to be able to go and do something, we're peaceful. Maybe we need a nap. Maybe we want to go sit in our car. Maybe we want to call our spouse or our family member during that time. That's fine. But when I see this true excitement for people that work together to be able to relax with one another away from their work, but now sit at a table, enjoy lunch together, commune with each other, and all these wonderful things, talk about their families, talk about what they're going to do for the weekend, talk about their vacation they just came back from, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, they slowly start to just disappear. And now you're sitting in a break room all by yourself, trying to figure out where you can go because everyone else has left. They begin to disengage from each other. That family feeling is no longer there. That feeling of being able to communicate with one another. People are exhausted, worn out, burnt out. The high turnover. Everybody coming in and then going out. People that were only there for a month, 2 months, walking out. I've seen people come in for one day and look around and say, nope, no thank you, and walk out for whatever reason. I don't know the reasons. I don't get into their business. But they are here and then they're gone. And that happens way too frequently. There's a low trust amongst these, within these cultures, amongst the people. They smile in each other's faces, but then they walk away and it's like, I can't trust that person. I can't say these things to those people anymore. I can't, share my personal life with this individual. I can't trust that they're even going to care. And so once again, relationship is broken down. And then there's a spiritual fatigue. It's real, y'all. Spiritual fatigue. In every instance that I have been in these situations that I talk about right here on this podcast, my spiritual fatigue comes when I would sit at my desk or stand at my station. Again, I'm talking about multiple different positions that I've held. And I sit there with my head hung, whispering under my voice, Lord, help me. Father, just help me to make it through this day. Lord, help me to be the greatest example of your love to these people in this office. Sometimes I feel worn out. Sometimes I don't want to be here. But I also want to be the one that shows that love that they are not receiving, that shows that care and concern and that commitment to care for them, to pull them aside and pray with them. Spiritual fatigue, y'all, where you are just sitting there saying, Lord, I want to be the best that I can, but my heart is not here right now. And that is one of the hardest places to be because you just want to walk out and you're like, Father, just remove me from this place. Give me something better. We begin to search for that better thing, that greater thing, that better opportunity to be able to be used in a in a better way. Everything is better, right? We're always looking for better. And here's the problem with all of these issues, all these struggles that end up showing up, they're clearly visible, is that the leaders are often surprised. Because guess what? No one told them the truth. Some of them are legitimately sitting there wondering what in the world just happened. What is going on? I'm totally lost. Other leaders, I'll be bold enough to say they knew what they were doing. They knew. But there are a lot of leaders out there that legitimately sit there and they are surprised and confused because they have no idea what that individual is feeling. They have no idea how a certain situation was affecting the team or the group or the employee or the project that they were working on, whatever it was. They are sitting there surprised. And so it's the real deal, y'all. We see these things day in and day out. So let's go ahead and shift gears here because I want to talk about a little bit of positive stuff as well. I want to also share with you what healthy cultures have in common, okay? We're going to talk about what does work. So cultures that can handle truth, they tend to share a few of these, let's just call them core characteristics, okay? They value psychological safety. They encourage curiosity over control. All right, as I'm reading these to you, I want you to just think about them for a moment. Let's go back to that first one. They value psychological safety. They care about that individual. They want to make sure that they're okay. They want to make sure that they're not struggling. Maybe their focus is off a little bit. I've shared this story before, but I had a manager one time at a store that I worked at who would make it their habit, if not every day, but it's very frequent, but if not every day, it was at least every other day, they would walk the store first thing in the morning, literally walk the store. It's a big store, okay? So take that lap around, checking on their people, and they would make a point to say, good morning, how are you doing? And if anybody responded in any way that seemed off, just by an ounce, that individual would stop and would say, you doing okay? They would question them again. And if you slightly tilted your head or was like, they would stop and say, are you sure you're okay? What's going on? Talk to me. And if you didn't feel like talking about it, they always left their door open. Well, listen, if something's bothering you, if there's something that I can help you with, please come and see me in my office. When you have a break or when someone can cover you, just come and talk to me, because I want to make sure that all is good. That's all that people really need. A lot of times you can shift their day just by showing that you're concerned, just by taking a moment to ask about them. There were some days I was tired. That was my only issue. I was exhausted. I worked 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. at this job. So you can imagine at 5, 6, maybe 7 a.m. when they were walking around, I'm just exhausted. My team had not showed up. I was setting things up by myself. I was having to tend to the customers by myself. I'm trying to look for managers that will step in and help me until my team decides to show up, if they even do. And being left there all alone, just that individual stopping to ask how I was doing so that I could express, listen, I need some help. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and I need help. No one's here. That was enough to completely shift my day. There was a pivot that would happen, and I was able to start moving at a faster pace, getting my job done, doing it with everything that was within me, more concerned for the customers, more of a love and excitement and passion for the customers because someone took a moment to stop and say, hey, are you okay? And to step in, and eventually I see managers coming over. What do you need me to do? I was able to give some instructions, and that was it. The day was fine. If we would just take the time to check on our people, this psychological safety, this checking in on your people, this letting them know that you're there for them, letting them know that you are available. And then the next one, they encourage curiosity over control. Quit trying to control the situation. Listen to your people. Allow them to express to you what it is that they're thinking, the ideas, the plans, the whatever creative, idea that they have in their head. Do you always have to do what they are asking? No, but you took time to hear it out. It could be the best idea you have ever heard in your life. Had you not listened to it and tried to control the situation, you're not giving them an opportunity to grow. They prioritize growth over image. So here we are. We're leading right into growth. And then they model humility from the top down. I want to touch on that word humility. I was working with some young people this past week, and, they were going over a leadership assignment. And so we're talking about leadership and integrity, patience, what a leader is. And the assignment was asking them, what are some other characteristics? What are some other things that are important to remember in leadership? And a couple of young ladies, they were like, I can't think of anything else. I don't know. Now they're still learning, right? They're young. They're teenagers. They're learning this. I'm glad that they are learning about leadership at such a young age. It's so important. But the first word that came to my mind, because it's so important to me, was humility. I said, humility is one of those things, one of those characteristics that is so important in leadership. And so, of course, their question was, well, what does that mean, humility? And it was a wonderful teaching moment for me to be able to say, it's when a leader can stand up and own their own mistakes. It's when they're not afraid to be called out. They're not afraid to, or they're not trying to point the finger at everybody else. They're not throwing their team, the people that they have been placed over to lead, they're not throwing them out there as the problem, but they're saying, listen, if we failed, we all failed together. And we're all going to do what we need to, to do better next time. I am in this boat with you. I'm not standing on the outside trying to guide you in and lead you in and making you do it, on your own, that struggle on your own. We are all in this together. And so being humble is just saying, it starts with me. I am the leader and I need to lead better. The humility does not make someone appear to be weak. It actually shows strength, a different kind of strength that is so needed. And so, just remembering that they will lead, they will model that humility from the top down, from the leadership down to their employees. In healthy cultures, questions are welcomed. They're not punished. Been there, where those questions are like, why are you asking me this? What is the reasoning? This is unnecessary. No, questions are welcomed in healthy cultures. Mistakes are addressed. They're not hidden, okay? Feedback is normalized. It's not weaponized. And then learning is ongoing. It's not conditional. So you're constantly learning something new. Truth isn't rushed. We're not going to just try to solve it very quickly and be done with it. Truth isn't shamed. We're not going to shame our people for speaking up. And truth isn't punished. The most important thing to remember is that truth is processed. It takes time. And we have to take time. It's like when someone says, don't immediately speak, which is reacting, right? Don't immediately speak. Take a moment to process what you just heard. Take a moment to think about what was just said, process it, and then respond. Respond with an answer that is going to help the situation, not cause more of a culture that is going to feel like I'm just going to get attacked every time I have something to say. So remember that processing truth, it takes maturity. It definitely takes patience. And it's going to take leadership courage. Now, I want to jump into faith and culture building. We're always going to talk about faith. We're always going to share God's word. And so from a faith perspective, culture matters deeply. And I'm going to share a couple of scriptures here with you that really, really speak to the truth that we're talking about. 1 Peter 5, verse 2 through 3, and this is the NIV version. It says, "Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be, not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock." What a beautiful picture of what a leader should be. God has entrusted us as leaders with a flock under our care to take care of them, to look after them, to train them, to walk with them. We're not trying to get any gain out of this. We're just eager to serve. We have a servant's heart. And we're not there to try to control them. We are there to be great examples to them. And so I love how God's word always shows us exactly what it is that he wanted for us. Another one is Matthew 25, 14 through verse 30. This is the parable of the talents, and I would highly encourage you to go and read it. Matthew 25, chapter 25, verses 14 through 30. I love this story. But the reason why this scripture matters, it's talking about the parable of the talents and the things that were given to 3 individuals, a certain amount of money, and they were entrusted with it to see what they were going to do with it before the master came back. And so one of them doubled it, the second one doubled his, and the third one buried his. And when the master came back, he called him a fool. You buried it because you were afraid of what I would do instead of going out and doing something with it, multiplying it. And so we see that throughout Scripture, the leaders are evaluated not by what they possess, but how they steward what they've been given. These 3 individuals, they were given these different amounts of money to see how they were going to steward it. Because the ones that stewarded it well, that was a little bit of a tongue twister there. The ones that went and did what they were supposed to, they were made leaders over cities. They were given this responsibility. And so Scripture reminds us that leadership is stewardship. It's not ownership. In 1 Peter, leaders are called shepherds of God's flock, not lords over people. And what we lead has been entrusted to us, not given for our control. And Scripture is clear. Stewards are measured by faithfulness, not power. So we don't own people. We steward environments. And environments, they shape the hearts, habits, beliefs, and outcomes. Faith-centered leadership understands that truth spoken in love builds trust. Accountability strengthens community. Accountability is so important. Accountability strengthens communities, okay? I got to just kind of pause here for another story. I know we're getting kind of long on this podcast, but I haven't done on this episode, I haven't done a long one in a while, so let's just keep going here. When my daughters were in college, they were still very young. They graduated high school. They were homeschooled, so they graduated high school at 16. And they were in dual enrollment for their associate's degree at age 16 and 17. They finished when they were 17. But when they would work so hard on these reports and these papers that they had to write, and they would turn it in, they were doing some online classes, they would turn it in, and they would just receive a grade immediately sometimes. Not all the time, but some of them were very fast. And I would say, oh, wow, that's awesome. So, what did your teacher say? Your professor, right? Because it's college level. What did your professor say? What kind of notes did they leave? And they were like, well, Mommy, they didn't, and they were talking to my husband as well, Daddy, they didn't give me any notes, no feedback. I said, you didn't get any feedback on what you wrote? Well, no. And I would always tell them, hold your professor accountable to respond. Because you want to at least know, like we have worked so hard on these assignments. I was in college at the same time with them, taking a couple extra classes for a certification. And I told them, I said, you want to know what they thought. It's only fair, right? Because you worked so hard on your paper, just as I did on my papers. So go back and send them a message. Oh, I see you graded my paper. I would love to hear what you thought about it. I'd love to hear your opinion, or your thoughts on what I wrote. And if there's anything you think I can get better at, let me know. Always hold them accountable. Why? Because that is their job. It's their job to teach you, especially if you're doing an online class and you don't have a lot of interaction with the teacher, and they may not do these live sessions. It's all done, through here's your assignment, get it done, read this chapter, go over this unit, but nobody's really verbally, talking to you. Then you have a right and a responsibility to hold them accountable to their job. And so they would do that. And of course they'd get a response, but it was almost like saying, did you read my paper, or did you just give me 100 for turning it in? And it's just an honest, reaction, a feeling that we have. We just want to know, hey, our work was not in vain. I worked hard on that. And so give me a little bit of a response here. And so I love that, we see that here in this as well when we're talking about accountability. Accountability strengthens communities. It puts it back on those professors, those teachers, those managers, those supervisors, the leaders, to just know that they have a very important job. And it's going to strengthen their community. The teachers will begin to have conversation and will begin to engage again in their teaching methods and begin to describe certain things that they're seeing and reading and experiences. It just might reignite a flame in them for what it is that they love doing that maybe they lost. All right, let's keep moving on. Grace makes growth possible. Showing that grace. All right, the times that I had issues, that I tried to talk to people, maybe I had questions, I still showed grace. I was still very polite, very patient when talking to them, very willing to listen, but I still spoke truth. But I showed that grace. Not storming into an office, yelling at someone, cussing somebody out. I've seen it done. It doesn't go anywhere, guys. But just to show a little bit of grace and patience in those moments, it makes growth possible. And humility keeps leadership grounded. We've talked about humility already. Culture is where faith becomes visible, not in what we quote, but in how we respond. That word is very important to me. We learn to respond, not react. So for the leader who wants to build better, and this is where we're going to just go ahead and close up for today. If you're leading or you're preparing to lead, no matter what position you're in, okay, I want to invite you into this honest reflection. Ask yourself, is honesty rewarded or quietly resented? These are hard questions, and it's best that we take the time to hear them and to really look at ourselves. We should always do a self-reflection before looking at and pointing the finger at everybody else. So is honesty rewarded or is it quietly resented? Do people feel safe to speak up or only safe to comply? Big one, y'all. Are mistakes met with learning or are they met with punishment? And does leadership model humility or defensiveness? Are you quick to get very defensive, in those situations? And here's a key question for y'all today. Would truth stay in the room if it challenged you? Because culture doesn't change through statements or slogans or values that are on the wall, okay? Culture changes through consistent response. For the person who has felt silenced, and I just want to pause here for a moment, because this right here, we can feel that we're alone a lot. If you've ever worked in a culture where your honesty was met with shutdown, if you've learned to stay quiet just to stay safe, if telling the truth cost you connection with people, with leadership, whatever connection was broken, I want you to know you weren't wrong for wanting honesty. Truth isn't the problem. The unsafe culture that you're in is. And healing often begins when we recognize the difference. So I want y'all to remember that. So in closing, if you want truth to stay in the room, you must build a culture that can hold it. That doesn't mean every conversation is easy. It means every conversation is handled with care. Healthy cultures don't avoid the truth. They grow through it. And leadership is rooted in faith. And they understand this. Truth is not the enemy. Truth is the invitation. So I want to go ahead and end here for today. And I want to thank you for spending this time with me on the Expressions of Destiny podcast. If this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who may need it. And be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss what's coming next. We're going to do one more part next week. And then after that, we'll do kind of a roundup of everything. So until next time, keep living with intention, leading with faith, and walking boldly in your purpose. God bless.